Good morning, Dynasty Degenerates. Welcome back into the BDGE Dynasty channel. If you're new to the channel, make sure you go down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content that we're bringing to you. And if you're coming back to the channel, I know you couldn't start your Friday off without getting down here early, discussing Dynasty. You needed to inject it in your veins. I got you covered today. Today we're going to get into some strategy as we're looking at the draft being less than 3 weeks away. Obviously, at this point, we're starting to focus heavily on the rookies in the NFL draft and what we're going to do in our rookie drafts ultimately. So if you're positioned with the top 5 pick, what I want to do is give you a POV of one of my teams where I am positioned with the top 5 pick, a specific lineup league where I have the 102. I haven't actually made any trades in this offseason yet with this team, but what I want to do is go through the team that I have, where I'm positioned, what I really need to or want to address, how am I best going to do so, am I better off drafting a player at the 102, seeing what I can do in a trade, and explore options. And ultimately, to do that, I need to understand the market and the specific dynamics of that league that I'm in. But before I get into the options that you should explore, if you do have a top 5 draft pick, you already know what I need you to do. Tuck your shirts in. Stop yapping. Let's get right into it. All right, so let's get straight into this. Let's stop dilly-dallying around. So let's take a look at the team that I've built, where it's positioned, and what I really need to address and how I want to improve it relative to the league that I'm in. This league is going into its year 5. It's a 12-team Superflex league. We're starting 9 players. So the quarterback in the Superflex spot, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, the tight end position, and 2 flexes. It's a half PPR and another half point for the tight end premium. So receivers and running backs, they get a half point per catch, and a tight end, they get a full point per catch. So a tight end gets double what another position would get as far as a catch goes. Now, over the years, I've actually had a really nice team assembled, but I've experienced quite a bit of bad luck, and ultimately, I have lost every year. I have not captured a title in any one of these years. So just give you a quick rundown. In 2020, the inaugural year, going into the semifinals, I end up losing to Bills Mafia. He was the highest scoring team in week 16. All 2 go into week 17. I have an absolute ridiculous week. I had Alvin Kamara on that Christmas game. You may remember wearing the red and the green shoes, but it really didn't matter. I was in that 3rd place game. So I got 3rd in the first year. Now going into year 2, the 2021 season, I even improved on this team further, and I was really in the driver's seat, the favorite to win the league in 2021. I ended up making a trade with a team who wanted a running back, a hero running back, and I was reluctant to give up Jonathan Taylor, but he gave me a price which I felt like I could not refuse. He gave me 4 first-round picks and James Conner for my Jonathan Taylor and a 3rd. Now in the playoffs that year, Jonathan Taylor wasn't the reason he ended up winning the title, but it was the reason he got there. And when we played ultimately in the finals, and by the second wave of games, there was really no point in watching because he already established 175 points and it was over for me. Got 2nd place. And then just like Ricky Bobby, if you ain't first, you're last. So 3rd place and 2nd place finish first 2 years. Going into the 2022 season, I hit my biggest string of bad luck for sure. Now, going into 2023, I made a ton of moves going into this season to really shift a lot of the team makeup. And prior to this year, I had a little heavier running back approach with this team, especially being drafted in the 2020 season, when running backs carried a lot more weight in Dynasty and in startups in general. And I really wanted to start to form a really good core of wide receivers, even though it is a half PPR league. And after making a ton of trades in the offseason, I completely rebuilt this wide receiver room with a core group of A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, and Cooper Kupp. So 5 wide receivers with a maximum of 4 different starters at that spot. I had Saquon Barkley and Cam Akers as my running back 1 and 2, and I had Travis Kelce at the tight end position, and I still had some 24 draft picks as far as liquidity to play with in season. So I felt really good about the team going into this 2023 season. Now I ended up starting off extremely hot. I had a 7-0 start. However, over the next 4 weeks, I ran into a bunch of buzzsaws. So I go from 7-0 to 7-4. My team regains a little bit of steam. I went out the rest of the regular season to finish at 10-4, and I had the most points for, but ultimately I only got 3rd place. 2 teams had better records ahead of me, and actually almost everybody on my team scored less than their projection. So this great team that I assembled and great start loses in the first week of the playoffs because I didn't earn a bye, but it really wouldn't have mattered. This team that was really well assembled just was not hitting its stride at the right time. So here I am, a rainy, dreary morning where I'm telling you that I have nothing to show for all this dynasty value that I have. But here's the thing. We can't focus on the past too much. It's time to move on and figure out how we're going to win a title. So when I take a look at the team, I told you I haven't made any trades this offseason, right? So everything's pretty much still intact from when I finished the season last year. But the one thing was I was sitting on a first of a team that was really bad, and that first almost became the 101. Just outside of that, I ended up earning the 102 with that. So I have this 102 pick, and what I wanted to talk about today, obviously, is with this specific team, and for you to think about some things you should be looking to do. How do you shake it up? Some options that you can explore if you have a top 5 pick. And I wanted to do it in a specific lens so that you can think about this and conceptualize it how you'd like to for your specific team build. So let's go through and take a look at the team that I have right now, the 102. And then the big thing is talking about the league that you have, who has what picks in the draft, and then ultimately, given all those league dynamics, what are some moves, some options you should explore with this early top 5 pick that you have that's going to be reaching a really high peak in dynasty value. Now, taking a look at what I have from top to bottom, in the quarterback room, I have Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and I have Matthew Stafford currently as my quarterback 3. Now, my wide receiver room, I'm still sitting with A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Brandon Ayuk, DJ Moore, and Cooper Kupp as my wide receiver 5. And then when we take a look at the running back room, I have Saquon Barkley, Devon Achane, and Isaiah Pacheco as my 3 primary running backs on this team. I have some fill-in options of guys like Ty Chandler and Roshan Johnson, Cam Akers, Rico Dowdle. And then when we take a look at the tight end room, I have a pretty interesting and unique tight end build here. I have Travis Kelce, who's definitely getting older, probably going to end up having to just see Travis Kelce go off into the sunset, see what type of production he can give me and for how long. But I also have him backfilled with Kyle Pitts now, who I was hoping was going to already come in and be a positional starter for me. Kyle Pitts was not that beneficial to any dynasty teams the last 2 years, but with Kirk Cousins coming in, I feel really good about him now. And David Njoku's coming off of a top 5 season at the tight end position. He looked really good with Joe Flacco. He showed some moments with Watson, and I think in a full season, if Watson can stay healthy, Njoku's still a plus option at the tight end position. And then you already know, if you watched last week's video on Friday, my love for Noah Fant, I have him as a dark horse, as well as Tucker Kraft. So I have plenty of tight ends on this build. Now, when we take a look at the 2024 rookie draft in this league, when you take a look at the board, the first thing I notice anyway when I'm looking at a draft is all these gray names on here, which basically means there's been a ton of shifting and movement with these draft picks. And the first thing you're really going to start to see is that the draft class is really spoken for in leverage by I Want to Shit on You. Pretty fitting team name for South Harmon. He has the 101, the 104, the 106, the 108, and the 109 in this class. So he's got 5 picks inside those top 9. And those are all, with what we know today, looking to be really highly sought after dynasty players being drafted in that range. Then the only other person that has multiple picks is Ken Adams. He has the 103 and the 111. So I'm sandwiched right in the middle at the 102 here. And when I look at it and I'm thinking, okay, at the 102, what do I want to do with my team in a perfect world? You could probably make the case either way, that I'll just be flexible here and I'll take Marvin Harrison Jr. or Caleb Williams, pretty much whatever falls to me. I personally still have Marvin Harrison Jr. at 1 at the wide receivers in this 24 class, although Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze are really special prospects in their own right. So I'm not trying to discount them. I've gone back and forth between Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels as my quarterback 1. I think the rushing upside Jaden Daniels possesses as a QB is something that's really tantalizing, especially in fantasy football. But the big thing that's really kind of changed this for me with Caleb Williams is this team at the 101 is already in such a great position to surround him with really good talent. He's got DJ Moore on the outside, can play some in the slot. You also just bring in Keenan Allen, really great older slot receiver. It's going to be really friendly for a guy like Caleb Williams. And then you don't even know what they're going to do with this 109. Do they trade back? Do they end up taking another weapon for him? I think the sky's the limit for the situation he's going to be in. Even though I don't think Caleb Williams offers the rushing upside that Jaden Daniels does, I think that I really have to go ahead and go with Caleb Williams at quarterback 1 again now, because he's going to go to this great landing spot, because he's so highly valued in Dynasty. Now, in a vacuum, in theory, you just simply say, take the best player available of those 2, go on about your merry way, and find a way to draft for value now, and then trade for your needs as far as what you need in your lineup later, because you have the value on your team. But this league is going to be a rare example where I think it's important to go through all the minute details and make sure that you're really assessing the league in its totality and the way that the distribution of players goes, and how are you actually going to make this value that you're drafting in a trade later, because there are rare scenarios, which is very much like this one here. So when we get into breaking down the different teams in this league, there was some big shakeup this year as far as a ton of trades going on between a lot of different teams. In particular, one team made 15 trades with a lot of the same managers, and some of them, in hindsight, I'm not going to say collusion, but they are lopsided trades. And because of those lopsided trades that all seem to go in favor of one manager, we're now looking at really having 3 teams that are absolutely stacked at the top. So when we take a look at the way that these 3 super teams are built and the fact that there's really not a glaring hole on any of these teams, in particular at the quarterback position, there's not some area of weakness for them. And what I'm ultimately trying to do, I think this is where you have to understand the situation you're in your league, and ultimately if that's going to change the way you draft. Now in a superflex league where it's lineup and we're starting 9 players, primarily, the foundation is going to be quarterback for me, followed very closely in second place by the receiver position. So the quarterback and wide receiver are going to be the positional cornerstone pieces for me in a league like this, especially understanding the scoring specifically of this league. Now, this may not be the case in a lot of your leagues, but I think it's important to understand, especially as dynasty leagues go on year in and year out, the longer a dynasty league has been around, there tends to be more of a separation from the teams that are really good and the teams that are tanking start to become really bad. And when this separation happens and there's not nearly as much parity, the teams at the top, they may start to control a large majority of the assets that are really going to help you differentiate your team from the pack. So when we take a look at this league, the distribution is insane. We're talking about right now in startups. Just think about this for a second. The top 18 wide receivers in startups. I just went off the list. So we got Jefferson at 1, CeeDee Lamb at 2, Jamar Chase at 3. Then we got Amon-Ra St. Brown at 4, Puka at 5, Garrett Wilson at 6, A.J. Brown at 7, Tyreek Hill at 8, Olave at 9, Nico Collins at 10, London's 11, Ayuk's 12, Waddle is 13, Pittman's 14, DJ Moore is 15, Devontae Smith is 16, Tank Dell is 17, Rashee Rice is 18. So those are the top 18 receivers off the board. Now here's the thing, 15 of those 18 wide receivers are on 3 teams. And the receivers that are not on those 3 teams, they're not like the elite guys. Ken Adams has Drake London, Evil Weasel has Tank Dell, and I Want to Shit on You Kyle has Jalen Waddle. He has a Dolphins problem. He's a huge Dolphins fan. And breaking it down even further, so Ewok Village is a team that has Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, followed by Geno Smith at his quarterback 3. Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, wide receivers 1 and 3 respectively right now in ADP. And if that's not enough, he also has Nico Collins at wide receiver 3, Michael Pittman Jr. at wide receiver 4, and then his wide receiver 5 is lowly Devontae Smith. Now Horns knows best. He has a quarterback room of CJ Stroud and Trevor Lawrence as his super flex option, and then he has Russell Wilson at quarterback 3. Follow that by the wide receiver room of having CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Rashee Rice. So that's 6 of the top 18, and 5 of those receivers are in the top 9 as far as startups go, before you get to the rookies added into the mix. And then you have my team, so I have Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson as quarterback 1 and 2. I think my quarterback room with those 2 quarterbacks is definitely the best in the league. And then my receiver room, still really nice, but you have A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Brandon Ayuk, DJ Moore, and Cooper Kupp. The difference here is I don't have any of those wide receivers that are really elite as far as their age goes. With A.J. Brown, he's going to be 27, and the Eagles finished really poorly those last 6 games of the season, so his value is a little bit down right now. Tyreek Hill, people are basically saying, does he have 1 or 2 years left in the tank? I don't think anyone's concerned with his production in the short term, but the biggest problem is going to be, can he stay healthy? We saw he got hurt at the end of last year. And when does Tyreek Hill eventually retire or not produce at the receiver position? Brandon Ayuk and DJ Moore, really nice solid options, but again in that 26-27 range where they're probably starting to meet a plateau, both coming off the board in the 4th round. Cooper Kupp, with the age he's at, plus the injuries he's dealt with, and the rise of Puka Nacua, I'm not nearly as secure as I once was with Cooper Kupp on this team. So I need to try to make up a little bit of ground at the receiver position to the top teams in this league. But not just that. The distribution, they have bottlenecked and really cornered the market on the young elite wide receivers that everybody really wants in the game of Dynasty today. So for me, when I'm looking at what I need, if I was to draft, let's say at the 102, let's say it's Caleb Williams, for example. If I draft him, yes, my quarterback room becomes a lot better. But ultimately, what am I looking to do? I don't want to have to carry 3 elite quarterbacks because I can only play 2. And it's nice to have an insurance policy, but that's really not going to help me maximize and optimize this roster to the best potential that I think that it could. I already have 2 elite guys. I'd rather my quarterback 3 be an option closer to Stafford, someone that's further down as far as dynasty value, but in a pinch, I could throw in and don't feel horrible about him being my super flex option. So I don't really think Caleb Williams is the best fit for this team. And then when you talk about the value and moving it later, the big problem with that is what? In theory, let's say I go into this quarterback order, which I'm a big proponent of in general, and typically when the league distribution isn't quite like this, you'll be able to move Caleb Williams because he's a quarterback and an elite one, currently valued inside the top 12 at least. This guy is going to be able to be moved for a haul And when someone needs a quarterback, they'll send you skill players and they'll probably give you a plus to really make it worth your while. But here's the problem. Those guys control the elite wide receivers that I'd be trying to target and really get out of a trade of Caleb Williams. And they're not going to tear out key pieces of their skill group when they have quarterback rooms like Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert and CJ Stroud and Trevor Lawrence. It's not going to make a lot of sense for them. And when we start thinking about that, at least for me, one of the things at 102 that I'm looking to do is I would love to get Marvin Harrison Jr. I think on this team, it's very clear that one, I have some aging receivers, and it would be great to backfill Marvin Harrison Jr.'s youth, as well as the possibility that he's a difference maker in points per game earlier than most people in his rookie season. So I could have my cake and eat it too, right? Have a little bit of youth and have some production. And I don't have to worry about when a guy like Cooper Kupp last year has a big dip in production. Like if that happens with Tyreek Hill or if I have an injury. So now what are the options that I'm going to be exploring here at the 102? Obviously, if I sat there and I made my pick, it would be really hard to not take Caleb Williams. Given the fact that he is so highly valued in Dynasty. But I am definitely concerned with this league and its current distribution of assets and the way that people value things in Dynasty today, with receivers being so high, that I'd really be able to make Caleb Williams pivot into a big haul that isn't just giving me depth. I'm looking to get high-end wide receivers that I can actually boost this wide receiver room overall closer to the elite mix. So I'd be tempted to take my second receiver off the board, in particular, if I didn't get Marvin Harrison Jr. at the 102 here. Let's go ahead and take a look at some things that I'm going to explore based on what I'm seeing with the draft board and the way it shakes out. So Kyle has the 101, he has the 104, and he has the 106. What I like to do when I'm trying to trade or find out the best way to trade with somebody, I'm looking to be as flexible as I can while understanding what I'm trying to do with my team. But now, what is Kyle trying to do? I want to shoot it in with the 101 and the 104 and the 106. One of the ways I'm kind of going to approach this is to see what his preference is. So if I go to Kyle and say, okay, Kyle, is it possible for me to come up from 102 to 101? And what does the plus look like for that? What is the difference in price? Would you be willing to come back to this 102 spot? See what that plus is, and if it's something that's palatable for me, and if I have the assets ultimately to make that deal work for him. If it was cheap enough, I'd probably just go ahead and secure Marv in this league. Now, that would be something I'd be willing to do if it made sense for Kyle. But there's probably a chance that Kyle says, you know what, nah, like I'm not even going to entertain that. I'm just going to simply make my 101 pick. I'm not really looking to trade back at him. Thanks for the offer. Now, if that's the case, these don't necessarily have to correlate and go hand in hand, but he's not as interested in trading back. But then I'm going to pivot. Would you be willing to come up from the 104 to the 102? You could go ahead and lock up the two top players in this draft, get Marvin Harrison, get Caleb Williams, and now at that 104 spot, I'm guaranteed to get either Malik Nabers or Rome Odunze, regardless of what Ken Adams does at 103, and I'm also going to get whatever the plus is to go ahead and go back to that 104. Now, with this league distribution, it's going to be a lot harder for me to do what I think is important to explore. If you have the 102, you have really good quarterbacks, you do have good wide receivers, they're starting to get up there in age, and realistically, because you can start 4, it's almost like you can never have enough, especially of the elite ones. So when you can identify what I want to do with this 102 pick is draft a receiver, I think typically if the league distribution wasn't this way, and I know they're not going to come up and let me get their wide receivers that they have cornered right now as far as the market goes. So in this league, I'm not going to be able to see what would it take with my 102 to go up and get a CeeDee Lamb, to go up and get a Jamar Chase, go up and get a Justin Jefferson. What do I have to package together to go get that? In this league, that type of a trade is not going to present itself. So I'm basically trying to figure out how I can get the next up-and-coming wide receiver that's going to get into that mix. And this 2024 class has 3 wide receivers that present significant upside to make a lot of noise in their rookie season and put a total shakeup on the wide receiver landscape in Dynasty right now. So overall, the things I'm going to be exploring in particular on this team with this 102 pick, first I'm going to see, is Kyle willing to let me come up to the 101? If it's a cheap plus, I'd go ahead and just do that. Lock that 101 up, give him that cheap plus, and make my pick of the receivers. If he's not willing to do that, he doesn't want to trade back. Is he maybe willing to come up from the 104 to the 102, lock up Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. or whatever his pick is of the wide receivers in this class? And then now at the 104 pick, regardless of what Ken Adams does at the 103, I will have either Malik or Rome in that spot while netting a plus in value. But if Kyle is not really willing to play ball, I'm going to end up talking to Ken Adams at the 103 and see what he's willing to send me as a plus to go up from the 103 to the 102. Given what I'm seeing on his team, I'm not really keen that he's going to give me much of a plus to go from 103 to 102, but I'm going to inquire just in case. You never know until you make the ask. And finally, if none of that works, I'm going to hit up Evil Weasel at the 105. He is taking over an orphan that has a lot of cleanup to do on this team. There's a chance that he might want to come up to the 102 and secure a cornerstone quarterback like Caleb Williams there. We'll have to see what the plus would be and if it makes sense for me. I do believe at the 105, I'll still be able to get one of Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze and really try to boost my team to help make it a better juggernaut in this league that has 3 super teams. So that's what I got. Let me know what you think. If you were in this situation and you have the 102, what are you doing? What type of trade offers are you sending out? Do you think there's something that I'm missing here? Do you think that I should be trying to make a different pivot than the ones I've talked about? Let me know down in the comments, and let me know if any of the leagues that you play in, if you've seen this type of crazy distribution as far as the high-end elite assets go. And finally, if you have a top 5 pick in this class, assess what your team is and what you're trying to do with your team. Are you contending right now or are you rebuilding? Make sure you're exploring every option with that top 5 pick. So there it is. That's the full breakdown and rundown of my team in this league going into year 5 in Dynasty, positioned with the 102. And I'll see you back here talking more Dynasty strategy and trades on Friday for the BDGE Dynasty channel. I'm out of this thing.